الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. غفر الله لنا ولشيخنا وللمستمعين والمسلمين. يقول الشيخ المجدد الإمام محمد ibn Abdulwahhab رحمه الله تعالى في رسالته آداب المشي إلى الصلاة: وإن كانت الصلاة أكثر من ركعتين نهض مكبرا على صدور قدميه إذا فرغ من التشهد الأول، ويأتي بما بقي من صلاته كما سبق، إلا أنه لا يجهر ولا يقرأ شيئا بعد الفاتحة، فإن فعل لم يكره. ثم يجلس في التشهد الثاني متوركا يفرش رجله اليسرى وينسب اليمنى ويخرجهما عن يمينه، ويجعل اليتيه على الأرض، فيأتي بالتشهد الأول ثم بالصلاة على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم بالدعاء ثم يسلم، وينحرف الإمام إلى المأمومين على يمينه أو شماله، ولا يطيل الإمام الجلوس بعد السلام مستقبل القبلة، ولا ينصرف المأموم قبله لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم: إني إمامكم فلا تسبقوني بالركوع ولا بالسجود ولا بالقيام ولا بالانصراف. فإن صلى معهم نساء انصرف النساء وثبت الرجال قليلا لئلا يدركوا من انصرف منهم. The Shaykh Hafizahullah Ta'ala began by praising Allah. All praise belongs to Allah alone. And may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon the one who there is no prophet after him, and upon his family members and companions, that which precedes. Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdulwahhab rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned in his treatise, if the prayer is more than 2 units, so if the person is praying a third or fourth unit, third unit such as Salat al-Maghrib, or fourth such as Dhuhr, Asr or Isha, then the person should come up on using their feet or the palms of their feet. And the Shaykh mentioned Habibullah Ta'ala, if the individual doesn't have difficulty in doing so, but if the individual has difficulty, so they need to come up using a stick or the likes, then it is permissible for them to do so. And the Shaykh mentioned Habibullah Ta'ala, this is as it's related to the prayer that has 3 units, such as Salat al-Maghrib or the likes. So this is not, for example, for the traveler, except if he's praying Salat al-Maghrib, because Salat al-Maghrib remains 3 even for the traveler. But for example, the person who is a resident, and he's praying Maghrib or Dhuhr or Asr or Isha, then he would have to implement that which the author mentions here by coming up after the first tashahhud. The Shaykh mentioned Habibullah Ta'ala, the first tashahhud, like we mentioned previously, that the person says the shahada, and if they increase upon that, meaning after the shahada, and this is the first tashahhud once again, they say the shahada, and then if they want to increase and say salams upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's permissible to do so. But in the second, that which the author now is mentioning, rahimahullah ta'ala, is the second, or is the third rak'ah, or the third and the fourth. So he mentioned that the person stands up by putting their feet on the ground and standing up, but if they need a stick, then they can use it. Then the person recites Surah Al-Fatiha, and the author mentioned that they don't recite anything after Surah Al-Fatiha, but the Shaykh said, Habibullah Ta'ala, that if the person wants to recite something after Surah Al-Fatiha, then they can. This is for the third and the fourth rak'ah. And the author mentioned, rahimahullah ta'ala, that the person does not say this loud. So the third rak'ah and the fourth rak'ah, it should not be heard. And what is obligatory is that they recite Surah Al-Fatiha But the Shaykh Habibullah Ta'ala said, once again, if they want to recite something in addition to Surah Al-Fatiha, they can do so. And there is no harm in that, what the author mentioned. فَإِن فَعَلْ لَمْ يُكْرَهْ. And if the person recites something after Surah Al-Fatiha in the third or the fourth rak'ah, then it is not disliked, meaning it is permissible. And the Shaykh mentioned, Habibullah Ta'ala, that there's a hadith in that regard. There is a hadith in that regard. Then he said, there's something else. When the person stands up for the third rak'ah and the fourth rak'ah, they don't do the supplication or the beginning supplication. Unlike the beginning of the prayer. In the beginning of the prayer, the first rak'ah of the prayer, they did the opening supplication. But for the third or the fourth, they don't do the opening supplication. And he mentioned Habibullah Ta'ala because, and likewise, when the person stands up for the third rak'ah, they raise their hands with the takbir, because this was reported in the hadith of Abdul bin Muhammad radiallahu ta'ala anhuma in Sahih Bukhari, that he said that the Prophet ﷺ would raise his hands in takbir in 4 places. When he entered into the prayer, when he went into the ruku', when he rose from the ruku', and when he stood up after the first tashahhud. So this is the third rak'ah. So it is legislated that you raise your hands, and the Shaykh displayed that you would raise your hands to the level of your shoulders. And he reiterated that there's no loud recitation in the third rak'ah. For example, Salatul Maghrib or Dhuhr or Asr, the third and the fourth rak'ah, the third or the fourth unit of prayer, there's no loud recitation, but the person would recite to themselves. And he once again said the most correct opinion is that you can recite something after Surah Al-Fatiha. But he said, but the Imam should focus on, or he should consider the people that are praying behind him. He should consider the congregation. He should not elongate the prayer so that this harms the people who are praying behind him, because the Prophet ﷺ said, if one of you prays and leads the people, he should shorten it, the prayer, for verily there is someone old, someone who is weak, or someone who has a need. So he has to leave after the prayer, so the Imam should not elongate the prayer. Then the Shaykh mentioned Habibullah Ta'ala, and then after the third unit in Salatul Maghrib, or the fourth unit in Salatul Dhuhr, Asr or Isha, the person would sit for the final tashahhud. When the person sits for the final tashahhud, the left thigh is laid flat on the ground, and the person sits on their backside, and they sit on the thigh, and the right foot is raised. And the Shaykh mentioned, Habibullah Ta'ala, that the toes should be facing toward the Qibla if the person has the ability to do so. But if it's too difficult for the person, then it is not mandatory that they do so, because the Prophet ﷺ said, Yassiru wa la tu'assiru, make it easy, do not make it difficult. And likewise the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُمْ مُيَسِّرِينَ, verily you have been sent as people of ease. So it should not, the person should not have difficulty in doing so. If it's too difficult for them to put their thigh on the ground, their left thigh, and raise their right foot, then they can do what is easy for them. And then the person would do in the last tashahhud like they did in the first tashahhud, meaning At-Tahiyyatu lillahi was-salawatu wat-tayyibatu, they would do the same thing, and then they send salams upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as it was taught when the companions said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when Allah Azza wa Jalla said, Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima, verily Allah and the angels, they send peace and blessings upon the Prophet. O you who believe, sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. To the end of the verse, the companion said, we know how to, so the companion said, yeah, Rasulullah, how do we send salams upon you? Then the Prophet ﷺ taught them exactly how to send salams. O Allah, send peace and blessings upon Muhammad and upon the family of Muhammad, just as you have sent blessings upon Ibrahim. O Allah, bless Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, just as you have blessed Ibrahim. And there's another narration, as you have blessed Ibrahim and the family of Ibrahim. So the Shaykh mentioned, Habibullah Ta'ala, whichever means that you, or whichever manner that you choose, which is authentically reported upon the Prophet ﷺ, it is accepted. It is accepted, but that which is the best is what the Prophet ﷺ taught the companions. Then once the individual finishes the last tashahhud, meaning the shahada and the salams upon the Prophet ﷺ, then the individual can supplicate. They can supplicate to Allah seeking their need. And the best thing that the person should do, which is in a hadith which is considered to be jayyid, it is considered to be good, was that they seek refuge in Allah from 4 things, from the punishment of the grave, from the trials and tribulations of this life and death, and from the fitna of the Dajjal. This is what the Prophet ﷺ taught the companions. So this is that which is befitting for the individual to do, and they should say or seek refuge in Allah from these 4 things, because there was a specific hadith mentioned about these particular things. Then the author rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned what should be done by the imam. The imam should give the taslim on the right and then on the left, and then the imam can turn toward the congregation by the right or by the left. He can turn toward the congregation by turning to the right or turning to the left. But the imam should not continue facing the qibla for a long time. The shaykh mentioned, Habibullah Ta'ala, after the imam says the taslim to the right and to the left, he should not begin to make tasbih, because there's a congregation which is praying behind him. So he should keep in mind that there's a congregation, so he should immediately turn toward the congregation. As the Prophet ﷺ said, pray as you see me pray. So the Shaykh said, although facing the Qibla is something which has its merits, it's something which is good and it has its merits, but the Prophet ﷺ said, pray as you see me pray. So what was done by the Prophet ﷺ, after he made the taslim, he would turn around to the congregation. So this is that which the imam should do. Then the Shaykh mentioned, Habibullah Ta'ala, that the people who were praying in the congregation, they should not leave the area of prayer before the imam. They should not leave the area of prayer before the imam. It is not befitting that they do so. It's not haram, but it's not befitting that they do so. But as for the taslim, as for saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, it is forbidden for the congregation to do it before the imam. And if they do it before the imam, the prayer is invalid. The prayer is invalid. Then the author rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned about if there are women praying in the congregation. If there are women praying in the congregation, the women should immediately, after the taslim, the women should leave the area of prayer, so that they do not mix with the men. And so this, the Shaykh mentioned, Habibullah Ta'ala, so this shows that the women should be separate from the men. They should be not praying near the men, and when the prayer is over, they should immediately leave the prayer area, so that they do not mix with the men. So the men should wait for some time in order to allow the women to leave. So the Shaykh mentioned, Habibullah Ta'ala, so this shows you that mixing between the sexes, mixing between men and women, it is something forbidden, and it shows you how the women should be diligent or eager to leave the area of prayer, so that they do not mix with the men. And then the Shaykh mentioned, Habibullah Ta'ala, so this shows you that we should be very diligent and vigorous in learning how the Prophet ﷺ prayed, and likewise also learning how the people prayed with the Prophet ﷺ. So you have in this the treatise, it mentioned how the women should leave immediately after the prayer, and we also have it mentioned previously how the best rows for the women are the rows which are furthest away from the men. So the women should not pray in rows which are close to the men. And then after that, the Shaykh mentioned, Habibullah Ta'ala, after the person has done the taslim, it is befitting that we do the afkar, and it's going to come. He said, Habibullah Ta'ala, it's going to come, that we're going to mention what types of supplications the person should say after the prayer. So the Shaykh mentioned, Habibullah Ta'ala, so it's incumbent upon us to learn this act of worship and to fulfill it in the best of manners, because verily the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever
conducts the prayer and preserves the prayer, it would be a protection, a means of protection from the hellfire on the Day of Judgment, and it would be a means for Allah entering the person into Jannah. So we should learn it, and we should fulfill it or complete it with sincerity, and we should do it in accordance to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And we ask Allah to make us from those who are truthful in fulfilling this act of worship. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give might and glory to Islam and to debase disbelief and kufr. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.